All right, thank you guys so much for joining us on the show today. I have Jess and Gwen with me, and I would love to just get started by having you guys introduce yourselves and let everyone listening know who you are and who you serve.
Hi, yeah, this is Gwen. We're from Hey Hello Studio. We're based in Cleveland, Ohio, and we serve female entrepreneurs through custom branding, websites, and marketing graphics. And we are also in the process of building a course to help like entrepreneurs just starting out.
And I'm Jess, so I'm the other half of Hey Hello Studio. And as Gwen said, we work out of a studio in Cleveland, Ohio right now, but we actually have worked together for about a decade in corporate America before we launched Hey Hello Studio. So we've been together making stuff for a long time, but we have taken our talents away from corporate America into our own design studio. And so we love helping other people get started in their entrepreneurial journey.
Awesome. So I love a good corporate America to entrepreneurship story. That's my story too. So if you guys kind of want to elaborate a little bit about that and let us know how you guys got here, how you decided to branch out on your own, and kind of what you guys are specifically doing now, like maybe what course you're coming out with, but I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, so I can start from like the way back. So Jessa and my story is kind of funny. We actually both went to the same college, were in like the same type of program, lived down the street from each other for an entire year and never crossed paths. And it wasn't until a couple years after starting like in professional world that we ended up being at a major greeting card company that's based in Cleveland, Ohio, which is American Greetings. And from there, we kind of just like built our partnership. Jess, you can talk more about like the journey of that.
So one of the things that we did early on in our career together that I think we were like kindred spirits is we started a blog, and it was like corporately at American Greetings, they hadn't had like a real blog before. And so we made this pitch and we were like, if we can get all of our normal work done and still like write articles and post content, is that okay? And our bosses like took a chance on us and let us, and we ended up being actually super successful. And we had a little makeshift photo studio in an abandoned quarter office. And I think that was like the first taste of loving interacting with people and getting to not just like design, because especially when you're in greeting card land, you sort of design something and you let it go and you don't know what happens and you don't know who the end person is that's using it. And so we were able to do this blog that's like, oh, here's how you could use the products that we created and tell the story behind them. And that was really fulfilling. You want to keep going, Gwen?
Yeah. So to add on to that, there's a little bit in there about us creating some stuff and then wanting to like teach people how to use it a little bit differently. And I think also just like the teaching part that both of us really enjoyed. And so from like there, we were part of a digital think tank, part of American Greetings. So that like really tapped into like our entrepreneurial spirit where we're like, oh, okay, like we can do this and like learn strategy and kind of like tapped into a different side of us that we didn't like know as much about. And from there, we ended up like talking a lot about what we wanted to do or like having like some dreams of wanting to be creative, but wanting to be strategic and like, how do we do those things? And we ended up actually meeting once a week at a brewery after work and talking and like, we had like an entire business plan. We looked back and we were like ready to start a business, but it just didn't feel like the right time and place for us, like personal life wise. We like to say that we were like on opposite ends of the spectrum. I had just gotten engaged, so I was planning a wedding, and Jess was going through a divorce. So opposite ends of the marriage spectrum.
Right.
But we kind of needed the stability of like corporate, like the lives that we knew. So we kind of just like dug back into that.
And I think, sorry, go ahead,
Are
Michelle.
you guys full-time in your business now?
Yes.
Yes. And I think that's one of the things that's so interesting and that we always talk to people about who are trying to get started is like, there was a lot of start and stops for us. So if you look at like what our story looks like, it's like, oh, we've been in business for a year, 18 months, but we've actually been side hustling for like a decade and trying to get started. And whether it's imposter syndrome or like the leap to leave your full-time job, it's really scary. So then when we finally were able to do that and do this full-time, I think maybe it was even a little sweeter.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. And I think a lot of people feel the need to rush. As soon as they start a side hustle, they immediately have to jump ship from corporate. Whereas the reality is a lot of people are side hustling. They're, the weekend warriors and things like that. So can I ask, how did you kind of know it was right to make the leap from part-time to full-time in your business? Was there like a moment where it clicked, or was there any sort of benchmark you used? How did you make that decision?
So it's interesting for us because there's two of us, and
Right.
to have two people leave a full-time job and both have income is like very, very difficult. So I actually left first. And at first, I left American Greetings, which is a big corporation, to go to a startup. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to take a pay cut. It's going to be something different, but it'll get me closer to like what we want to do. And then once I was there, I was like, okay, now the jump isn't quite as far down to go, okay, how many freelance jobs do I need to have to do this full time? And so I think sometimes, especially when you're in a big corporation, the jump down can seem really steep.
Yeah.
But like that step kind of helped.
Yeah. And for me, so when Jess left, there was also a part of our story, like that our corporate jobs at the time were kind of like telling us that maybe maybe it was time to like find the next thing for us. Like long term, we didn't see a path of going in the direction we wanted to go. So at the time, I was really pregnant too. So it was like not a time to be like, I'm going to just like go
No
and leave.
healthcare. Yeah.
Yeah. Like
Right.
healthcare. Well, and also like, being home with a new baby, like I wanted to have that like whole experience where I could be home and like enjoy that time and not be like trying to figure out how to like sleep again and also like do work on the side. So like I still needed the security too. But by the time I left, I actually coincidentally also went to a startup, but not the same one. So we just continued to have like the same story unintentionally.
Awesome. Well, I'm so glad that it seems to be successful and working out for you guys.
Yes, it was a scary time when we actually did go like 100% full time. It was right before the pandemic. We literally were working in the studio together for 3 weeks, and then they were like, schools and daycares are closed. But I think part of that is like, okay, this is ours now to figure out. And like, we're gonna roll with the punches. And we were doing in studio photography at the time. And like, okay, we can't do that anymore. So what are we gonna do instead? And so 2020 has been it's taught us a lot of good lessons.
There's something about being forced to learn how to like do something else or to like shift how you thought you had to do things that really like puts you like in a different place and be like, okay, I don't have to do the thing that I thought I was going to be doing.
Liberating.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. And a lot of people that listen to my podcast are brick and mortar business owners. So this entire pandemic just has been such a process of pivoting and trying new things and learning. And, if you're listening to this at the time it's being recording at the end of 2020, we are still really nowhere. There's nowhere end in sight in terms of the pandemic. So a lot of business owners I noticed are kind of taking a step back and they want to work on things like branding. They, are using this as an opportunity to kind of take a step back, rework things, make sure everything is cohesive. So I think this is perfect timing for this. So kind of jumping into the branding discussion, for people that are listening that might not really understand what branding is or why it is important, can you kind of explain to us why it is so important and what you think are the most important things for business owners to focus on, especially when they're getting started?
So we do talk to a lot of people who I think have a lot of barriers around branding. So when people think of branding, I think the first thing they think of is just a logo. I need a fancy logo and it's going to make me look legitimate. And getting there is hard. So two different things with that. One, the idea of branding is so much more than your logo. So It is every experience that your customer or your potential customer has with your business. It could be the way your customer service reps talk to potential customers. It's your marketing, it's your social media posts, how your website makes them feel. And so if you take a step back and think, I can do more about, or in terms of building my brand, than just focusing on my logo. I can think about, how do I want to sound? How do I want people to feel? And we actually start there when we do branding projects, and it's where we recommend anyone new start. So we call that process brand positioning. So what makes you different than everyone else out there? And that's going to be like your unique differentiator. That's what you want to lean into. And that is actually the core of your brand. Your logo isn't the core, your positioning and the reason you exist and you're different from everyone else. So that's like the first thing. And then the second thing is a logo. But like I said, that can be a real barrier. And this is like, we love giving people the permission to simplify your logo. Like nice, typeset, classic. Oftentimes people are like trying to use like 6 script fonts and fit like their whole tagline in. And it's like, if you can just put your business in a nice typeset logo and just have it be consistent, that's a great place to start. You don't have to overthink it. We recommend writing a bio about yourself that you can use everywhere. So like get sharp again on what value you're offering. And this is actually interesting. When we do brand audits for people, the number one thing we see is people forget to tell people what they do in like their Instagram bio. It's like, I'm a mom and a puppy lover, and like, go to my website, but not like, I'm a health coach for women who are over 40 or whatever their niche is. And so having that and making sure everywhere you are, that's front and center. And then the other thing we say is just an online presence, but not necessarily a website. So when someone searches your name, you want something to show up that makes you look legitimate, but that can be a Facebook page or an Instagram account. And there isn't anything necessarily bad about that these days. Like not everybody has to have a full-blown website. Maybe you just have a landing page at first. Because that's another thing people will say, well, I can't promote myself yet because my website isn't done. And we're like, nope, get out there, be pushing content out and connecting with people, and your website can come over time.
I think that's so smart. And I'm a huge fan of starting with the landing page. I teach the same thing because, again, a huge part of my audience is brick and mortar business owners. So a lot of times they feel hesitant because they're not actually physically open yet and they don't want to launch their website until it gets closer. But I always encourage them to just start with the landing page, start with an Instagram account, and you can, always build from there. But I love that you mentioned to not having a perfectly done website or a perfectly done logo hold you back from just getting started.
Absolutely.
I love that. So when it comes to, I know you guys talk about how branding can, how you said, increase a business's legitimacy and decrease overall marketing costs. So can you talk a little bit about that and how it can actually decrease spend overall?
Yeah. So if you have consistent like branding and you're talking that like telling people that you do like a specific thing everywhere, and also telling them over and over, because I think a lot of times we get like nervous to tell people like, oh, I'm telling them that too many times. Well, people aren't like really remembering the thing that you told them like last week. So you just keep telling them. So you're getting in their head about like what you do. So you think about, you see commercials for brands all the time and they tell you the exact same thing because they want you to think of them when you like, you know, like Taco Bell when I want to do late night run. I don't know. It's who you think of. So it's really important to like consistently be telling them that. And it takes, I forget the exact metrics, but it takes like something like 7 to 10 touch points for a customer before they like start to remember you. So you want to like continually tell them that. So then when they start to think about it, they can remember that you're the person to go to for this specific thing.
And the other thing I think is when we talk about being strategic with your branding and being unique, we always ask people, what what's the norm in your industry? So if you're in banking, the norm might be that everyone's a little corporate. It's very like professional, every sharp edges, and red and blue are the main colors. And it's like, okay, you want to be like, you want people to say, oh, she's not like everybody else in banking. Like, she breaks it down and makes it easier. And she talks to me like a real person, and those kind of things. And like, you set yourself apart in whatever way makes sense for you from everyone else. And then you don't have to work as hard. Like, if you're competing on the same things as everybody else and you're saying the same things as everybody else, then it becomes price or noise or like convenience, and you don't want to compete on those things. When you have a unique message that you're delivering, and that's what we consider branding being, whether you're delivering it visually or through your copy or through your content, you start to stand out, and then you don't have to hard sell as much. You're creating value and you're showing your differentiator. And then, like Gwen said, as you do that over time, that engagement starts to pay off, and you don't have to pay as much to get in front of people because they want to listen to what you have to say and they value it.
That's a good point. When I first got started actually doing online marketing, I went from corporate America to my own business. And I think the biggest mistake I made was I tried to be very corporate and I tried to be very buttoned up. And my branding was very consistent with what I had been doing at my corporate job, but it was not the type of client that I wanted to attract for my business. So I ended up, like, a couple years in, I had to go through a complete rebranding, and just those few little tweaks, changing my business name, changing my colors, changing the language that I used, I made it more colloquial and more approachable. And I just automatically started attracting more desirable clients that I actually loved working with, as opposed to more like buttoned up corporate clients that were really misaligned with my business. So I love that you mentioned that, because I really didn't change anything else. I just rebranded, and it immediately changed how people viewed me and the type of people that I was then able to work with.
Yeah, I would even consider that like changing your foundation. Like, you changed your strategy just by saying, like, I talk differently to people, and colors have like a language. There's a whole psychology behind colors. So, you were speaking to the people that you wanted to speak to, versus before you were obviously speaking to like one type of person. But it's hard when you come from what you know. So you use what you know. So you knew corporate. So you're like, I'll do that thing because that's how I know to do it. It's really scary to like step outside your comfort zone.
Yep. And I was speaking in like third person, even though it's
Mhm.
just me. It was just me at the time. And everything was just very buttoned up. It was very, like, almost like it read as like a sales letter that you would send out, from corporate America, because I worked for a large company too. So it was very hard to kind of break out of that and understand what a more personal brand is, or what a more family owned brand is. And kind of warming it up and starting to speak again, like I said, a little bit more approachably. So I think that's something a lot of people, I would say almost everyone that listens to my podcast, has come from a corporate job at some point. So that is one of the hardest things that is to do, is to kind of break free from that very buttoned up brand and make it a little bit more warm and friendly and more like a family owned or a personal brand type of business.
And I think that's one of the things that we help people with when they're developing their messaging, is even things like contractions. Like, you'll write a whole email out and everything's like, I am, we are. It's like, we're, let's. Like, starting to break down some of those things are like micro improvements that if you make over time, they start to become second nature. I think Gwen and I, for our big moment of like really deciding what our brand was, is like, we're going to use a ton of emojis and emails, and we're going to sign off with XO. And like, if you're weird about that, then like, we're not the right people for you, because that's like just how we are. And we have big personalities and we're warm. And so being able to like kind of give ourselves permission. And so we try to do that for other people too, where we say, like, you don't have to say that. You don't have to talk like that just because you were sort of trained that way, because now you're a new brand that has like something different to offer.
I think that's a really good point. So, Jess, at the beginning, you kind of talked about a little bit about what not to worry about, what you should worry about. Do you have like a specific bullet point list of things that people should worry about or should get started with versus things they can kind of put to the side at first?
Yeah, so we actually, I'm sorry, I'm gonna like cut in, but like we have like 4 things that we just like
Okay,
think
great.
everyone, which just like covered, but like just like our hit list. It's
Yeah,
like,
I just need to like recap
yeah,
it
yeah,
because my mind is
the,
all.
yep. So it's brand positioning,
Okay.
your logo, which again can just be like really, really simple. Like don't overthink it, because it can get like complicated and you might actually end up sending the wrong message to potential clients or customers. You want a good bio that you can put everywhere. So like your website, your Instagram, like everything. And then in the online presence, like, and just picking a place where you are online.
So
Awesome.
some of the things that then we can say you don't need to worry about right away is like even a color palette. Pick a color that's like your main color that you use in a lot of places, and take a minute to like Google color psychology and make sure you're sending the right message. But pick a dominant color, and then over time you might add another couple. But we'd also see people set and like swirl around like 5 or 6 colors trying to get them perfect, and that stuff will evolve on its own over time, especially as you're like creating social media graphics and just seeing what works and what feels right. The other thing is like a ton of different variations of your logo. So a lot of people will hire a custom branding designer early on, and they have a word mark and a watermark and a regular mark and an alternate logo and horizontal and vertical and an email, like to put at the bottom of their email, which is the thing you don't have to do anymore, by the way. But you don't need that much. Like just one logo is fine. Just look the same everywhere. It's like that's the baseline. And then you'll know when you need more. You'll know when you're like, oh, I feel like I'm being held back by this now. And then the other thing is like we love the idea of custom brand photography. It's something that can really set you apart. But if you're just getting started, there are amazing stock photo resources out there now as well. So like don't feel held back by that if you don't have professional photography. It's like people love behind the scenes stuff. So don't be afraid to share sort of unpolished stuff, and then take advantage of all the free resources that are out there now. When we first got started, it was like $300 to download any stock photo. So it's the landscape is amazing now in terms of getting started.
I think also like for photography, there's ways to get creative. Like if you'd really benefit from having brand photography, trying to find someone local who maybe is just getting started, or if you have like anything you could barter with them for services. So it's not like money straight out of your pocket. You could try doing that. And like the worst they're going to do is say no, and you're in the same place that you were before, but you can try it time and time again and see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. When I first opened, I used to have a brick and mortar business. It was a play cafe, so it was an indoor playground type thing. And
Oh, I love that.
I actually bartered with a local mom who I knew was just getting started with photography, and I gave her child a free birthday party in exchange for, I think she did a couple different photo shoots. So she did one where it was just the plain setup. She did one with customers and then one like birthday party setup. And it was great. I love that you brought that up because it was mutually beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
Brick and mortar businesses are so expensive to open. So just anything that I could have trimmed off of our startup costs was very helpful. And it also worked because she spread the word about our business because she wanted to spread her work. She wanted to get
Mm-hmm.
her name out there. I let her share like watermarked images so that she was associated with the pictures because they came out really good.
Perfect.
So I'm really glad that you brought that up, that you don't need to spend, tens of thousands of dollars on all these expensive photo shoots
For
right
sure.
when you get started. There are definitely ways to make it work.
Definitely. And I do think when people are ready, and this isn't necessarily like a first step, but being able to showcase like yourself and your business in photos makes a huge impact on people. So a lot of people forget about that. They think about branding again as your logo and your color palette, fonts, but brand photography is hugely beneficial. And like Gwen said, like have one shoot, get somebody local who will do it for you can get a great photographer for under $500 to do a shoot.
Mhm.
And then you can keep using those photos over and over because, again, repetition is actually helpful. So don't feel like, oh, I used that once and I can't use it again. It's like, nope,
Yep.
keep milking those.
Yeah, I actually get so confused, especially in some of our larger groups, like the Digital Course Academy group. I will get so used to seeing someone's same headshots. And even if it's not the same exact position, I get used to seeing like their outfit, their style, what color lipstick they're wearing, things like that. And that cements itself in my mind. And then when I see something else, I'm like, wait, is that the same person? Is that someone new? And then I have to like retrain myself. So I actually really appreciate when I see like ads or posts or videos and it's the same cohesive branding. So I'm glad you brought that up. To me, as a customer who sees a lot of branding and I get so many ads in my feed, I actually appreciate seeing those same, not the same necessarily style. So maybe in one they're standing a different way, but it's like the same outfit, same color scheme, same background. I think that's really helpful for me.
Yeah, it kind of makes you feel like you know them too.
Yeah.
Like we are more familiar because you're like, oh, that I know this face. I can like trust it more.
Yes.
So one of our friends and clients, Emily Williams, she runs the
I love
iHeart.
Emily Williams.
She's amazing. She runs the I Heart My Life brand, and she got this photo shoot done with this beautiful bright pink shirt. And she used it so many places that people recognized that shirt and that color. And she just leaned into it. And so now, like most of her photo shoots, she probably has a closet full of shirts in that exact same color. And she uses it all over her website. And so I think that kind of thing can become iconic. And if it does and it fits, you can lean into it. And like you said, use it everywhere, make yourself super recognizable. And it actually like benefits your end brand.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that was a really good point. So, when it comes to branding and creating an effective brand for your business, what do you guys kind of look for, or what are the key elements that you tell people to focus on for their brand?
So there are four main things that make an effective brand. So
Okay.
one is being strategic. Second is being unique, and I'll go through all these. Third is being polished, and fourth is being consistent.
Okay.
So when we say strategic, that means that you are laser focused on who you're serving and what the benefit that you provide to that person is. And so then everything else that you're creating is going to you're going to gut check yourself. It's like, does this person get value from me sharing this? Will this person like this offering? Will this person, and sometimes you'll have two different like avatars, but I think it's important to have some idea of um, who you're going after and who you're not going after, because as you try to create something for everyone, you end up creating something for no one. So just really strategically thinking about what your positioning is, what value you're offering and who you're offering it to, and hang it on your wall and keep focused on it through everything that you do. The second one is unique. So this is going back to the what does everybody else do in your industry and how can you do the opposite? So like you have to find some way to stand out or else you're going to compete on price. Nobody wants to be competing on price. So we say that can be like experiences that you've had or a certain kind of perspective that you have that other people in your industry don't. It can be your process that you do things differently than the way everybody else does. And so really like making a list of what those things are and then deciding this is what I'm really going to push forward as my uniqueness and talk about that everywhere. Don't be shy. The third one is polished. So you have to take your business seriously in order for other people to take your business seriously. And that doesn't mean it has to be perfect. Like we're all about put it out there before it's perfect and get some momentum. But you do have to show that your polish is that you're a business essentially like worth paying for because you are asking people to, in a lot of cases, turn their hard-earned cash over. So making sure that you're presenting yourself as legitimate and then consistent. Just like keep getting out there with the same visuals, the same copy. It's not that you can't evolve over time, but don't be afraid to like hammer the same message home. Like if you follow us, you hear us talk about how important branding is all of the time. I'm sick of hearing myself talk about how important branding is, but still people, you say like the most basic thing and they're like, oh my God, that's so helpful. Like I've said that 7 million times. I'm so glad somebody still thinks it's helpful. But that repetition is really important in order to make a brand stick.
I'm glad you brought that up because I always feel the same way. But whenever I'm speaking to a new audience or if I'm speaking on a podcast, a lot of times I live so close to my expertise. And I'm sure the same is true of you. Sometimes we take all of these things that we know for granted. So I've already like made a couple notes since our conversation that I need to make sure that I'm, doing. So I think it's very helpful. And I think, even though I've been doing this for a long time, I've gone through 2 rebrandings, I still constantly, it's not at the forefront of my mind. It's not something that I'm always thinking about. And I think that's true of a lot of business owners. So I think it's great that you brought that up.
Yeah, no one else but you is like really thinking about how I'm different and what I have to offer to other people. So you just have to like keep telling them over and over. And I mean, the people that want to hear about it aren't going to get sick of it because they're going to like that you're talking about the thing that you know the most about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another mistake that I made when I was first starting out was when I was doing my brand positioning, I tried to make it seem like I could be everyone's, marketing consultant. And I ended up attracting customers that were like all over the board. And I was afraid to kind of niche down. I was afraid to push people away. I was afraid that if one of my colors was pink, that I would all of a sudden be super off-putting to men. And I had a lot of these sorts of beliefs that if I niche down, I would actually limit myself. But since I rebranded and since I really decided that I would specifically focus on a specific set of business owners and entrepreneurs, that was really when my business actually took off. So I'm glad that you brought that up, that you shouldn't be afraid to be unique and stand out.
Yeah, I actually think that probably comes from our corporate background where you're supposed to be everything to everyone and you have to have mass appeal. So you think that if you're like leaving someone out of the conversation, that you're going to like leave money on the table. But really, there's so many people doing so many different things. Like there's something for everyone. So if there's a specific person that you want to serve, like talk to them the exact way that they would want to be talked to. And like, they're going to start trusting you and they're going to start looking to you and then they're going to start giving you their money.
And I think the other part of that is you can actually charge more when you do that. So I adopted a couple dogs earlier this year, and we looked everywhere for a trainer, and everybody kind of looked the same. And it's like, okay, they've had a ton of experience and they look nice. And then someone said that they specifically tailor themselves and their training to dogs who have been rescued over the age of 10 or something. And I was like, how much of all of my money can I give this person? Because that is exactly what I need. So you get to this place where there's a bunch of dog owners, they look the same. Again, I'm going to like pick based on price and then like, oh no, that person is exactly what I need. And so if you can figure that out and then get in front of those people, you can actually charge a lot more than if you're the generic or the sort of commodity version.
I think that's such a good point. And I think a lot of us as consumers, I feel like once we get to a certain point, we've all been burned. We've all hired the wrong person. We've all purchased something that didn't work out. So I like that you brought up that, that person spoke directly to you specifically for your needs. And that made you a lot more comfortable. You felt like it was definitely going to work. But something else that I this is my favorite example of branding actually, and I am not a branding expert, but this was something that I had to learn over time. But so my corporate job was at a supermarket. So like literally everybody needs to eat food, right? So it was one of those things where we always struggled with speaking to different customers because we had customers all over the board, college students, older people who were on a fixed income, people who had tons of disposable income. And just because it's November, this made me think of it, but we always did 3 completely different campaigns for Thanksgiving turkeys. And I always bring this up when we talk about branding, and every single thing about each campaign was different. So there was, the cheapest option. They didn't even talk about how good it would taste or anything. They just talked about price. because that's what that customer cared about. They just wanted the cheapest price. Maybe they were buying it for, a donation or something. And then the middle one, they kind of talked about ease of use and how it was pre-trimmed and things like that. And then the other one, they talked about how decadent it was and how it was going to impress everyone. But even though every single person needs to eat food and most families in the US have a Thanksgiving dinner, I thought it was always so interesting how they were able to segment their customers into these three groups and then put a completely different campaign. I mean, different fonts, different language, different focus points. I always thought that was so interesting. And I didn't even realize it until, looking back. And, they use data to segment their customers and try to fit them into these groups. But I always thought that was so smart. So I just had to bring that up just because my mind is on Thanksgiving now.
Yeah.
Well, I think that ties into the strategy part too. So when we say like the first most important thing is that it's strategic, it's like that's exactly why, because everything you pick afterward ties back to the strategy. And if you didn't know that, then all of those decisions that you just named wouldn't have been able to be made. And so when we see people who are charging a ton for branding and they just are like, make me a Pinterest board and here's a logo, we're like, oh no, there's so much more that's so important to figure out first.
Yeah, it's like it's really amazing that your or old corporate job had like they picked out who their the ICA, their ideal client avatar, and like they had their three, and that's fine to like have three different types of people that you talk to. It can get really hard to do as like a smaller business to talk to like three very different people, but that doesn't mean that you can't have different people that you talk to, and you would have a different way that you talk to them.
Yep. So I personally, as a marketing and Facebook ad consultant, I have, done for you that is a completely different customer who want to just
Mhm.
pay me to do everything. And then if somebody can't afford that or wants to do the work themselves, I have a membership. It's $27 a month, but they have to implement everything. So I didn't start out that way. I think it's really smart that you brought that up. I started out with one product. I was a one-on-one consultant. And then as I grew, then I started branching out to multiple ideal customers, but I kind of focused on that one first, really nailed it down. And then once I was comfortable with that, then I kind of branched out and started doing the podcast and kind of speaking to people who were more into consuming free content. They were going to be more likely to want the do it yourself version. But I didn't start out with all these different branches. So I'm glad that you brought that up, that it can be difficult, especially when you're working on your brand positioning and nailing down your marketing. I think it's difficult to do that as a small business owner when you're just getting started.
I think one of the things that Amy Porterfield teaches in Digital Course Academy that I thought was so interesting and different from what I originally thought is that the person who wants your one-on-one services and the person who wants your membership or your course are actually two different customers. And I think I was in the mindset, and a lot of other people I've heard will say, well, I don't want people not to hire me for one-to-one because now I have this like cheaper alternative. And realizing that there are actually two different people. There's the do-it-yourself person and there's the do it for me. And so we have only up until this point offered custom one-on-one services, but we are launching a course in January for the exact same reason. So we're going to walk you through creating your own brand, and it's a lower price point. But for people who are just getting started, we actually don't recommend that they invest multiple thousands of dollars in their custom branding because, like you said, you don't even know who you are. Figure out like, are you the corporate person or are you more of your natural personality? And so giving that person an option, and again, that's like that comes later in your business, but the idea that you're not necessarily competing against yourself to the same customer.
That's a good point. And it might not be, one individual compared to the next. Like, for example, at one point in my business, I could be a do it yourself person. And then as I grow, I could turn into a more done for you type of person. So when you guys were talking at the beginning about building a landing page and building a social media presence, just because somebody invests in your lower price option doesn't mean that, over time you can't nurture them to eventually hire you for a rebrand or to elaborate. Like Jess, you were saying that you can start small and then eventually get big. So I think what holds a lot of people back is they kind of put these customers in these peg holes and they assume that they're just static and they can't eventually nurture them into becoming, somewhere else down their customer journey. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, that's kind of actually like the dream scenario if they like buy one of your lower price points and then you keep nurturing them and then they, give you more of their money later for a higher price thing. Like that's what you want. You want to build that relationship so that they trust you and want to come back over and over.
So one last question, that was going to be my next question was, should people just starting out invest in custom branding? Because I think that holds a lot of people back, especially for brick and mortar business owners who already have a ton of stuff on their plate. But kind of going back to my situation where my brand wasn't right and I wasn't attracting the right people, it was really obvious to me that I didn't have the right branding because I wasn't working with the people that I wanted to. But are there any signals or any red flags that people can look for, I guess, that might tell them that it's time for a rebrand, or maybe they need to change things up or talk to a designer or invest in a course or something like that? Is there anything that you tell people to look out for? I know for me, again, it was just I was attracting the wrong people, but is there anything else?
I think like that's probably like the strongest indicator, but I think there's also the situation where you're starting to feel like your business is held back or restrained from being able to do something that you want to do. Like if you want to grow in some way, or maybe you want to shift and be able to do something else, and is your branding like holding you back? And sometimes with a new brand comes occasionally like a new name, or sometimes it can just be like a little tweak in the name just to help like encompass the bigger vision. So I would say anytime you're being held back is usually when it's time to like start talking to someone. And not to say that someone just starting out isn't ready for custom branding. There are people who have a super clear vision and they know exactly what they're doing and they're ready for that investment. But a lot of times it's just still building the strategy. And that's with our course, that's what we want to be able to set people up with, because just because you're just getting started doesn't mean you can't have a solid strategy for right then to help you like move forward for the next year or two.
I'm so glad you brought that up because that was another mistake I made. So I also have a course where I teach indoor playground owners how to launch successfully, but I branded that business under my course name. And I didn't realize, because I hadn't invested in Digital Course Academy yet, I didn't realize that that was a huge mistake. So my entire business was branded under Play Cafe Academy, my YouTube channel, my Instagram, my website. And I once I started branching out and saying, okay, I don't want to just help indoor playground owners, I want to help all local business owners, I was constantly held back by that name because it instantly attracted people that were interested in indoor playgrounds, but
Mhm.
it also instantly repelled people who had no interest in that type of business. So I ended up rebranding to just my personal name because I have all of these different umbrellas. So I have a couple different business names, but now my YouTube channel is just my name and it encompasses all these different things. But I think it's so smart how you said, you should make sure that your business name or brand isn't holding you back, because I was constantly using it as an excuse. And I said, well, I can't teach about just generic marketing because I already branded myself as this. And felt myself saying that for a year. And then once I finally was like, you know what, I just have to do it. I have to create this new umbrella brand. And again, that was really only when my business started taking off, was when I actually made the leap into changing my brand. But it took some learning experience to kind of get to that point.
Yeah, I think it's there's just a lot of fear to like do that kind of thing because that's a big change. And like, of course, you're probably gonna lose some followers or something like that, or people aren't gonna recognize you that might have recognized you before. But at the same time, some of your like future ideal clients aren't gonna be turned off by you signaling that you do something else.
Yeah, I think that's smart. So, all right. Now I like to kind of leave everyone listening with some action items, or at least one big takeaway that you guys want them to remember as the big lesson they learned from this, or just one of the big lessons. So I'll let each of you go. Jess, if you want to go first.
Okay, so I would say go to wherever you have a presence online. So if that's your website, Instagram, Facebook, and look at it as if you're someone who has no idea what you do when you're landing there for the first time. Is it immediately clear what you do and the value that you provide and to who? And if it isn't, that is the first change to make. So it should be above the fold on your website. It should be in your bio in Instagram. If you have a links button in Instagram that you click through, it should be the first thing at the top of that page. And then again, at the very top on Facebook, not where somebody has to dig and go to your like about section to see it. But just be really, really clear and make sure it's the same everywhere.
I like that consistency point. All right, Gwen.
Yeah, I would say if you haven't already, dig into what makes you unique and then make sure that you're like using that perspective anywhere you're talking to people. Just like it'll help you stand out from the crowd no matter what you're doing, and people will appreciate or at least the right people will appreciate you having your different perspective.
Awesome. So if people want to learn more about your services or your course, where can we learn more about you?
You can find us just about everywhere on heyhello.studio. There's no .com or anything like that. So heyhello.studio, and on Instagram we're at heyhello.studio. And that should take you where you need to go.
Awesome. I'll also link those in the show notes, but awesome.
Amazing.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much. It was so helpful.
Yeah,
So
this is
fun.
super fun. Thank you.
We appreciate it.